Once again, I will be giving you some information that I think you might find rather fascinating and potentially usable in a Blue Book essay. We're talking about the national bank, which would seem to fit in nicely with if you're tackling the issue of taxes and spending, Hamilton's plan. He was the father of the national bank and Jackson's view of it. Will someone remind me Jackson's general political philosophy? Although yesterday we sort of discovered that he's sort of a hit or miss there. What is his general political philosophy? He's a, sorry? Well, that's true. He's a moderate. But if he had to pick a side, generally, he's a conservative, right? He wants the federal government's impact to be smaller than others would have. So he hated the national bank. He believed that there was no constitutional authority for a national bank to exist. He's echoing whom? Jefferson, right? Jefferson believed that the national bank should not exist, although Jefferson, interestingly enough, kept it while president. Jackson hated the national bank. He believed it had too much power. Remember, banks are not only the place where you put money, but they take that money and they lend it out. So imagine a bank collecting tax money and then deciding to lend it to Ridley because Ridley wants to start a new business, but not Katie because they're not quite sure Katie's trustworthy. You have a federal government institution picking favorites, saying, yeah, we'll lend to you, but not you. Jackson felt that this was an inappropriate role for a government-run bank. Private bank, fine. You someday you're going to go buy a house. You're going to go to a bank and you're going to ask to borrow thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that private bank might say, I don't know, but they're going to base that decision on whether or not they believe you will pay them back. And that's all fine, well, and good. But this is a government-run bank. And so Jackson was uncomfortable with a government-run institution picking favorites and picking person A over person B. He didn't like it. Okay, remember who that is? That's Henry Clay. And you might think, no, that's a banana. No, that's a photograph of Henry Clay. There's Henry Clay, and back off, ladies. That is a guy by the name of Daniel Webster. Look at those eyebrows. Those are eyebrows. You don't have them. Any of you have Mr. Scheffel?
Yeah.
When I showed Mr. Scheffel those eyebrows, Mr. Scheffel said, wow, those are eyebrows. And Mr. Scheffel had eyebrows. Actually, Mr. Scheffel had eyebrow. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Okay. These two were in favor of the national bank. They were Hamiltonian. And they were both senators. Now, does anyone remember what a charter is? A charter? We talked about it when we were talking about the 13 colonies. A charter. A charter is a permission slip to exist. When William Penn, for example, wanted to start a new colony, Pennsylvania, he received a charter from the King of England. Yes, you may start a new colony. A charter. If you want to start your own business someday, you're going to need a charter from the state of Wisconsin. You have to have permission to exist. And the bank had a charter. The bank had permission to exist, and it expired in 1832. Actually, no, it expired later than that. It expired like 1836. 1836. So the bank would cease to exist in 1836-ish. I'm not quite sure about that year. It's irrelevant. Just know that it was going to end unless Congress voted to renew the charter. And we have a president here who hates that thing. So if Congress passes it, what will the president probably do with that bill renewing the bank's permission to exist? Veto. He will veto bank. Interestingly, Jefferson agreed with the existence of the bank, even though he philosophically was against it. Jackson, not the calmest fella in the world, he is going to veto any attempt to renew the national bank, but they did it anyway. They knew he was going to veto it, and they did it anyway. What I mean by did it is they passed a bill. Congress passed a bill renewing the charter. He vetoed it in 1832. They renewed it 4 years early. They could have waited till 1836 and then attempted to renew the charter, but they said, "Now, let's do it now. Let's do it now." 1832. They renewed it now. Jackson vetoed it, and then they said, "Now we got you." Ha ha! And I'm wondering if you can figure it out. Yes.
Does the president only have a certain amount of vetoes?
No. Good guess. Yes.
It goes back to Congress, and Congress re-votes on it if they, or like both parties, or both House Representatives and Senate votes on it, and it has to get like, I don't remember what the.
It's 2/3 if they can get 2/3
So
approval.
2/3, and then they can override the president's.
Very good. That's all valid and wrong.
Oh.
Anyone else? The year is what's important here. They passed it in 1832. They could have waited 4 more years, but they didn't. They did it 4 years before it was going to expire. Why? What else is going on in 1832, which I'll remind you is 4 years after 1828? There's an election. That's right. He's running for re-election. Now, why do they think they got him? They passed the bill. He vetoes it, and they're like, "Yeah, woo!" Why? I don't understand.
I thought he was going. I thought he wouldn't be reelected.
That's right. Do you understand? These two believed that most Americans liked the national bank. So now they can say, vote for our guy. Our guy will, whoever that guy is, our guy will support the national bank. If you vote for that guy, the national bank will end. You like the national bank, therefore you'll like our guy. Make sense? All right, so it'll be interesting if I showed you the results of the 1832 election. Finish the thought. If Andrew Jackson wins, what?
The national bank's gone.
The national bank is gone. And can you tell me about public opinion about the national bank? Can we make a conclusion? They don't like the national bank. If Jackson wins, the American public has voiced its opinion, and they believe the national bank is no good. If Jackson loses, what the American public is saying is, we like the national bank. I'm going to argue the same argument about a year from now. About a year from now, there will be an election, and it's about Trump. If Trump is reelected, what the public is saying is, overall, enough with this impeachment stuff. Focus on important stuff. If Trump loses, what the American public is saying is, we're done with this guy, right? Please go away, right? We'll see. We'll see what happens, okay? So there's now an election issue. So now I'm going to show you, you are now looking at the results of the 1832 election. Jackson is yellow. Look at the map. It's pretty yellow. Look at this pie chart. That's the electoral pie chart. That's pretty yellow. The popular vote was closer. Now look at how stupid the opponents of Jackson were. Do you understand? I'm telling you that the opponents of Jackson were dumb. They were dumb. Who understands? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, did they use 2 different colors of brown, or is that like to represent the territories and clay, or is it the same color?
Brown is the same color, but you could exclude, well, no. Territories can't vote, so this is irrelevant. Okay, that's irrelevant. But look, Jackson ran as a Democrat. All right, and the National Republicans ran a guy by the name of Henry Clay. All right, and then something called the Independent Democrats ran a guy named Floyd. And then something called the Wirtz, the anti-Masonic, they ran a guy named what? Do we get it yet?
You won.
Very good. All right. Had the opponents of Jackson simply settled on one person, then it would have been a closer vote. And now maybe Jackson would have won anyway, but you're splitting the anti-Jackson vote. Just pick one person, go with him. And maybe this would have been a different result. Again, maybe not, because, Jackson won a majority of the vote. He actually won a majority of the popular vote. So actually, Jackson could argue, it doesn't matter. Run 1, run 10. I would have won anyway. Okay? So the public has spoken. They don't like the national bank. The national bank. Dracula here. He is the Secretary of the Treasury. His name is Roger Taney. He was the Secretary of the Treasury. He's the guy in charge of the national bank, which now shall suffer a painful death. The national bank will not be renewed. Now, it still exists for another couple of years, but it will not be renewed. It ceases to exist eventually. So now I have a question for you. Today, right now, does the United States have a national bank, a government-run bank? Used to, but then it died. What I'm wondering is anyone aware that there is a national bank today, indicating that it was recreated? U.S. Bank is a private bank.
But that would make sense.
They build a big stadium for the Vikings. Does anyone know? Okay. Well, the answer is yes. Yes, there is a national bank. It is called the Federal Reserve. The closest branch, that's a term I can now use because you understand, the closest branch is in Minneapolis. If you've ever been to a Twins game, you've probably driven right by it. It's a Federal Reserve Bank. At the Federal Reserve Banks, and there are 13 in the nation, and one's in Minneapolis, which is kind of amazing, that they chose Minneapolis as one of 13 cities in the nation where the Federal Reserve Bank does Federal Reserve Bank things. And you've driven right by it if you've gone to a Twins game. It's right on Washington Avenue. It's on your right. There's a big clock. You can take tours. And you know what they do there? They make money. They print money there. They print money. We'll talk about the Federal Reserve and how it works later. But the answer is yes. The United States has a national banking system with 13 banks spread around the country. It replaced this, which died away because of Dracula here. Any questions? Okay. So Jackson is reelected in 1832. His presidency ends 4 years later. He honors George Washington's two-term tradition. So we can now add 1836. This guy, Martin Van Buren, who was the MVP. And he is a Democrat. He is elected, that's him. He is elected in the next presidential election. Jackson is elected in 28, reelected in 32. Martin Van Buren is elected 4 years later. He is a Democrat. He is a conservative. He is a Jeffersonian. These should make sense. You should hear these things and think, I get it. I know what that means. To be a Jeffersonian, you should know what that means. Yes, dear.
So for the 10 presidents thing, are we going to need to know their party as well?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh,
Isn't that fun?
no.
It was during Van Buren's first year when something called the Panic of 1837 happened. Ah! It's horrible. One day in 1837, everyone woke up, looked around, and went, "Dang!" They were very scared, very scared. What's panic again? It's an economic depression. It's an economic depression. Now, notice when it happened. It happened in his first year. Did he make any decisions which led to an economic depression? And I can say the answer is no, he didn't do it. Jackson did it. Now, what we'll discover is, well, what is it that Jackson did? I don't want to spend too much time here, but what Jackson did, I'm showing you this map so that you can see. You see this territory here? This is all called the Wisconsin Territory. Here's something called unorganized territory. That's rather amusing. Okay, you want to move out there? Great. Enough of you move out there, you can apply for statehood. We all understand the process, basically the process, right?
Yeah.
When you move out here, what they'll do is they'll hire surveyors to plot land, and they'll divide it into acres of property, right? And then they'll put stakes out, and then they'll have literally a race, right? They'll have a starting line, and there'll be a guy with a gun, and he'll shoot the gun, and then you ride out on your horsey, and if you're the first one to grab the stake, you have the opportunity of buying that land. Who are you paying? The federal government. That's exactly right. You're paying the federal government. What Jackson did on one of his last days of his presidency was say, all right, you want to buy federally owned land? Awesome. You need to pay with gold. Actual gold. Not paper money that represents gold. Actual gold. Okay? Now, we are no longer on this standard today, but the United States used to be on something called the gold standard, which meant if you had a $100 bill, you could walk into a bank, give them the $100 bill, and they would give you $100 worth of gold, whatever that is. Today, it's about the size of your pinky. That's about $100 of gold today. I don't know what it was back then, but irrelevant, right? So no big deal, right? If you had paper money, you had dollar bills, go to a bank, turn your paper money in, get gold, and then you can go and buy federally owned land out there. Any problems so far? Okay, I'm not hearing any problem. No big deal. Let's say that you want to buy land. So, and you've got lots of paper money. Tell me what you're going to do.
Okay, can I please get some gold?
So where are you going to go?
I'm gonna go to the bank.
You're going to go to any bank and turn in. All right, so the bank says, fine. They go back, they get gold, they give it to you. What are you going to do? You also want land.
Go get gold.
Okay, and you?
Gold.
Yep. And eventually, all these people go to the bank and turn in their paper money, and supposedly the bank has gold. This is not an economics class, so if you really want to understand this, get into econ. But the basic idea is if you're on the gold standard, that bank has gold to back up all of their paper money. But here's the thing. Banks were guilty of something called prospecting. Prospecting is when you look out here. You know what's out here in them Dare Hills? Gold. There's gold out there in them Dare Hills. Banks printed money, more money, paper money, than the gold that existed. They assumed that there would be gold out here that would be found eventually. So they had more paper money than actual gold. So he retrieved some gold, and he retrieved some gold, and he retrieved some gold, and she retrieved some gold, and gold, and gold, and gold. And pretty soon the bank is out of gold. But all of you are customers of that bank. You have paper money, and now the bank is out of gold. You now have pieces of paper, but there's no gold. The banks ran out of gold, so all these banks closed. In 1837, all these banks closed because they ran out of gold. And now banks are closed. Now, if you're a business and you want to expand, to whom are you going to go to borrow money? There are no banks. And that closed. Banks closed, and as a result, businesses closed, and as a result, people lost jobs. We got no food. We got no jobs. Our pets' heads are falling off. And it caused the Panic of 1837. And you know who got blamed? He did. He got blamed. He got blamed for something Jackson did. This is the election map showing him winning the election. And he wins a majority of the popular vote. He wins a majority of the electoral vote. He wins South. He wins North. By this time, a new political party was in existence, the Whig Party. Look how brilliant the Whigs were. They ran one candidate and another candidate and another candidate. They ran 3 candidates. The Whigs believed if you run a bunch of them, maybe someone will beat them. And they're stupid. That is just dumb. You've just split the Whig vote. If you're a Whig voter, who are you going to vote for? You know what the Democrats could do in a year to guarantee they'll lose? Run multiple Democrats and think, well, someone's going to beat Trump. No! You just guaranteed you're going to lose. Because Democrats will say, well, who should I vote for? Which Democrat should I vote for? You pick one and you run with them. Okay? So we'll talk about the Whigs more, but generally, if you're writing down Whig Party, they're the new liberal party. They're the new Federalists. They're the new Hamiltonians. Right? Well, he gets blamed. He gets blamed for the Panic of 1837. Guess what's going to happen 4 years later when he runs for re-election? He's going to lose. There is a branch of history called economic history, which argues that presidents are elected or re-elected based solely on the wallet. You want to know if Trump is re-elected in 1 year? How's your parents doing financially? How are they doing? If they've had a good 4 years financially, they'll re-elect Trump. They will overlook his issues and say, I'm good. And they will re-elect Trump. And it's been fairly accurate. This guy got blamed for something he did not do, which caused the panic. And he will lose the next election. Okay. We are now switching violently to a slightly different topic, and that is how the U.S. get Texas. Okay. So, I mean, it somewhat has to do with this because we're talking about westward expansion. But you'll notice this map accurately shows the United States, and it's in this brown area. Texas is not in a brown area. Texas is not in the United States. And yet, clearly today, it is. So something happened. What happened? What happened? As Grandpa Potter used to say. What happened? And this is the story of what happened. Okay, so you'll look here. You can see here's the Mississippi River. These are states. Texas is right here. Texas is part of what thing?
Spain.
Spain, that's right. It's part of Spain. Although, by this time, so 1835-ish, Mexico had one independence from Spain. So Mexico is now a thing. Okay. And what Mexico did was say, we have an Indian problem. The United States was not the only country that had an Indian problem. Okay. And I don't mean to say Indians are a problem. I'm just saying that's the perspective of the United States, the perspective of Mexico. And the solution that the Mexican government came up with was, well, let's recruit Americans to move to Texas. They will become Mexican citizens, and then they can deal with the Indians that live in Texas. Texas had like 4 major tribes that lived in the area. The Mexican government came up with what they thought was a good idea. I think later on, the Mexicans thought that was dumb, but at the time, it seemed like a good idea. Let's recruit Americans to move to Texas. They'll become Mexican citizens, and then the Indians will be shushed away. Okay? And so they did. The Mexican government recruited Americans. By the way, the Mexicans also, this is kind of fascinating, they also recruited heavily Germans. And so there are today towns in Texas where the dominant language is German. German is the 3rd most common language in Texas. Number 1 is English, barely. Spanish is number 2. German is number 3. It's kind of fascinating. Okay. The problem that the Mexicans failed to foresee is in blue here. That now, when we're talking about immigrants now, this is sort of a twist of irony. Immigrants were Americans who went to Mexico. That's interesting because today it's obviously reversed, right? The United States has an influx problem with people moving into the United States from Mexico. 150 years ago, it was completely the opposite. The Mexicans are recruiting Americans to move to Texas. The problem was that there were three major differences between Mexicans and the immigrants who were moving into Mexico. And I have them as political, cultural, and economic differences. Okay? And so what we're going to do is kind of fine-tune that just a bit. Okay? Let's see. Political. What is the government system that governs the United States? What's that word? Democracy, right? We elect our leaders. We elect our leaders. Does anyone happen to know? I mean, I don't see why you would know this, but let's just take a shot in the dark. What type of government was Mexico? Not quite. They were a dictatorship. That's right. They had a ruler named Santa Anna. He was a dictator. And so you have people who are used to electing their leaders moving to a place where a military ruler is in charge. All right? That might be a problem. They might not like Santa Anna so much. Okay? Cultural. What is the dominant, even today, what is the dominant religion of Mexico? Catholic, right? Not only Christian, Catholic Christian. Mexico, even today, is one of the most Catholic nations on earth. It's like over 90% of Mexicans consider themselves Catholic. Okay? The people from the U.S. who moved to Mexico were not Catholic. Okay? It's kind of interesting. Catholic was seen as bad by Americans 120, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. That was like, oh, you're Catholic? Ew. Gross.
Were they like, what were?
Mostly Protestant.
Okay.
Mostly Protestant. Yep. Okay. So there's your cultural, and here's another cultural difference. What is the dominant language of Mexico? Spanish. The language of the Americans moving in was English. Okay, so that's a problem. Economic. Mainly what I'm talking about here is slavery. Was slavery legal in Mexico? Look where most of the Americans came from. The South. Guess what they brought with them? They're slaves. So we have democracy-loving, English-speaking, Catholic-hating slave owners moving to, excuse me. Hello? Hello? Your mom. Moving to a dictatorship that spoke Spanish, worshiped Catholicism, and did not allow slavery. Potential problem. Big time. Big time. Okay. So we're now setting the table for problems. Problems. Okay. Any questions here? One slide left. So what is the result? Okay. So fast forward a few decades. By the thousands, Americans are now moving into this region. Okay, you'll notice that the modern state of Texas is on here, but also parts of Oklahoma, parts of New Mexico, parts of Colorado, even parts of Wyoming. This was Texas. This is this thing called Texas. Okay, not the state of Texas, the Mexican territory called Texas. And they're moving in. They're moving in. They're moving in. But they speak English, and they do not worship Catholicism. And they bring their slaves with them, and they speak their English with them. Okay, and so we have a problem. Okay, and so they fight the Mexican government in an attempt to break off, right? And so the Texans fight the Mexican government eventually for independence. And what the Texans do is say, "Hey, U.S., when we break free from Mexico, can we join? Can we join the U.S.? Should the U.S. annex Texas?" Annex means take over. Should the U.S. annex Texas? Next question. I don't really care if you write this down or not, but did the U.S. government even have the authority to do so? I mean, Texas is not a territory. It's Mexican territory. So, the question, does the U.S. have the authority to even do this, right? And if so, are you adding another slave state? Are you adding another slave state? So there were concerns about whether or not the U.S. should annex Texas. Okay. The end. Unless there's any questions. Okay. Any of you been to Texas?
Yeah.
Did you go to the Alamo? No.
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 The Alamo is in San Antonio, which is Yater, and that's where the Texans fought the Mexicans in this huge battle yesterday. Yeah, yeah. Very, very, very true. Yep, so this area that I'm circling now, the dominant language is Spanish.
Where's the area where it's mostly German?
I don't know, actually. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, very good. Take a break. You've been sitting there for a long time. So when this class resumes at 9 bells, so you have 2-3 minutes. Everything Blue Book. Everything Blue Book. Job. In your advisories, did you do gratitude stuff today?
No.
Yeah.
Same.
You don't?
No.
Oh,
We have Larson.
well, that's kind of sad.
Oh, yeah. We just
You just hang?
hang. Sometimes we get a motivational speech. Which is a good time.
Did I create, I can't remember if I did it or not. Did I create a second CIS thing on Classroom for the next paragraph that doesn't exist
I
yet?
don't think so.
We're in concepts here? First paragraph.
Anyone else's computer look really weird today? Something weird?
I think it's just.
No, I didn't. Okay. So I'm just going to talk you through this. Right now, you have at your fingertips your refutation paragraph, the paragraph that you wrote or made a good faith attempt at writing. And so what I want you to do is simply to read it the way I am going to be reading it next week. Okay. Anyone else need a copy? Okay. Anyway, do you have a topic sentence that is making a claim that political party mistakenly argued blank? That's what you should have. Political party mistakenly argued blank. Okay? Check. If not check, fix it. Next, I need some document evidence. Prove that that political party made that claim. That's document evidence. So here's where you should have the specific speaker, whether it's Jefferson or Hamilton or Hay or Allen, and who they were, credibility, and the argument that they made, that the individual made. This is the document evidence. Okay, this should be coded in color number 2, whatever color that is for yuz. Okay, so if not, fix it. Fix it. the next thing is prove it with some specific evidence, right? You got to prove with some specific historical evidence that that person's argument bore fruit, that there was some validity to the argument. Okay, for example, I said this yesterday. Jefferson was the one who argued that taxes were bad. So my topic sentence, if I was doing that one, was with something like Democratic and Republicans mistakenly argued that taxes should not be levied. Thomas Jefferson argued that Democratic Republican, Secretary of State, blah, 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 argued that taxes might lead to rebellion. Okay, you might expand on that just a bit, but now you prove it. For example, there's a good couple of words. Are the words "for example" in your paragraph at all? Because that's a good idea. That tells me you're about to provide an example. For example is a dead giveaway that you're about to give me an example. Okay, and then some sort of specific example. In this case, it would probably be the Whiskey Rebellion in response to the whiskey tax. Okay, and so you're saying, okay, this seems to prove Jefferson's point. That would be number 3. That would be color code number 3, whatever that is for us. And then number 4 would be, your 2 cents. And the general response is, here's your interpretation of what Jefferson's saying, but then you add those magical words, but he's wrong. Or this is incomplete, or this is misleading, or this was not the normal path. Do you think that Americans violently rebel every time there's a tax? No is the answer, right? Do we complain a little bit? Sure. Do we voice our displeasure at the ballot box? Yes. Openly rebelling? When's the last time Americans openly rebelled in response to a tax? I don't know. I don't know. Okay. But he's wrong. He's wrong. This is an incorrect perspective would be number 4. And now prove it. Prove it's wrong with some specific historical example. And that historical example might be synthesis. So you're going to another time period and saying, see, this shows that the argument is wrong. Don't hang up. Oh, sure. Bye. Could you see Miss Emerson? I'm going to have to make it up to her. Okay, all right.
Oh, why did you say that?
Well, the last person hung up.
But normally you say.
I do. It didn't work, so I thought I'd do a different strategy.
Wait, what?
Strategy? Okay. Check. Okay. New assignment. The next paragraph. The one where you're agreeing. So if you disagree with Jefferson, now you're going to agree with Hamilton. If you're disagreeing with Allen, now you're going to agree with Hay. If you're disagreeing with Hamilton, now you're agreeing with Jefferson. It's the next paragraph. It's the other side. Okay. That I'm going to say fair for me to say is due tomorrow. Yeah, I said it. No, I'm sticking with it. I'll tell you what. I'll let Jack decide. Jack, I promise, I will honor whatever you say right now. When, keeping in mind that Blue Book essays are due, you start these things next Wednesday. And between now and next Wednesday, we have this paragraph, and then we need to start thinking about your intro paragraph, and then we need to start thinking about your concluding paragraph. And we got to do all that by Tuesday at the latest, right? So today is Wednesday. What is a fair due date for this paragraph, which I honestly, frankly, don't understand why you couldn't have it done like in an hour at the most. So, Jack, I will honor what he's about to say. End of class tomorrow. Is that what you're saying, Jack?
Yes.
Jack,
Other
not
Jack- other
not that Jack, that Jack.
other
Oh my
Jack
God,
also
look at
did
that. I was talking to Jack, and Jack thought I was talking about Jack, but I wasn't. I was talking about Jack.
I agree with what he said.
How about the Jacks lined up perfectly? That's unfortunate. That
I think Jack's statement is very good. I'll go with it.
what I like is Jack right now is talking about Jack in third person. Mr. Potter thinks that's weird. Yeah, I know. Okay, end of the hour tomorrow. You're assuming that you're gonna have a little bit of time. I'll try and make that happen. I will try and give you a little bit of time tomorrow. So end of the hour tomorrow, which might as well mean
Just
Friday. Friday when you, what am I gonna do? Hunt you down in your next class? Friday, when you walk in the door. Friday, when you walk in the door, you're done with this paragraph. Yes, dear. We do have one thing left to do.
Do you want it to be color coded?
Coded. Yep.
And,
Coded.
Are you gonna give us back the ones we turned in if it's on the same document?
Yeah, I don't even know if I'm gonna read it.
Oh, alright.
Oh, no, it's a separate assignment. Unless,
Yeah, because we can't type on it after we turn it in.
okay, I will return it to you. Well, I gotta see who did it.
Yeah, just return it at the end of the day today.
Fine, that's what I'll do. Yeah, and then you can just copy, if you're working on it, you can just copy and paste it.
Yeah, that's what I did.
What's the difference?
So much more work.
Stop rolling your eyes. I get that all the time at home.
Oh.
Okay,
Okay.
we have one task left to do, and this has to do with slavery. Okay, so you were assigned the intro by Colchin, yes? And your task with Mr. Lindenberg was to come up with the various topics that Colchin addresses in this, I will agree with you, rather difficult essay. Let's see how you did. What I want, my goal before the hour is over at 20 is to, so we have about 10 minutes here. No way this is going to take 10 minutes. Is to, as a group, say, all right, I think this is one of those topics. And all we're going to do is come up with a list, 5 or 6 topics. And then I'm happy. Okay, so you're retrieving this article from wherever's.
Are we supposed to read this one then?
That's for, you should have that, your page read by Friday for that one. But I'm talking about the intro. Yes, sir. Okay. Oh, sure.
On this page.
Just how many of you struggled with this?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
just so you know that the University of Minnesota History Department considers this an average freshman history reading assignment. No, I'm not. That this would be the reading of an American history college freshman taking the on-campus version of this class. This is par for the course. Okay, so if you really, really struggled, then we as a high school need to do a better job of giving you strategies to break down a reading like this so that you can understand what it's saying. Okay, and we will. Okay, having said all that, does anyone have a topic that you think Colchin was saying, yeah, I think this is one of the topics? Go ahead. Can you clarify that just a little bit? What do you mean?
How the study of how the slaves' economic and family independence changed.
Very good. So autonomy. I love that idea. Very good. Can we write this down? Write it down. Autonomy. Right? Slave autonomy. Right? The idea that they had their own lives. That they were more than a refrigerator whose sole purpose is to keep food cold. That's it. You might think of a slave as a refrigerator, but no, they had lives. They had lives. They were mothers. They were fathers, brothers, sisters, friends, enemies. They argued with each other. They wrote music. They wrote poetry. They had folk tales, oral folk tales, right? They had lives, and historians need to focus on these people as if they were a people with a history. You know, one of the things a historian that we'll look at later, he said the greatest problem with slavery is it robs a group of people of any sense of history, right? Dogs don't have a history. Dogs don't say, yeah, my grandfather, woo, he hunted rabbits, right? Dogs have no sense of history. Toys have no sense of history. Cultures have history, right? You have a history. You're an American. America has a history. Slavery eliminates all that. So you're not a group of people. You are a slave. And Colchin says, nope, that's not true. These people had a history. Was it written down? No. But they still had a history. Okay, very good. More. Autonomy, that's one. Go ahead.
Slave resistance.
Slave resistance, very good, right? How did they resist? Right? Anyone? Let's throw out a couple ways. You're resisting. What'd you do?
Away.
Running away. Very good. The most common, I believe.
Rebellion.
Open rebellion, right? Fighting back. Physical violence. Anything else? Protest. Oh, very good. Okay, I'll agree with that one. Yeah, they made signs. Didn't do their work. Yeah. Accidentally broke the tools. Oh no. Oh, I broke the tool. Acted real dumb. There's this one. I'll show you it. It's awesome. But the slave owner complained about how lazy his slaves were, and he took the hoe and he said, "This is how you do it, right?" And he did the whole thing. And he said to the slave, "Here, now you do it." And the slave's like, and he did it totally wrong. And the slave owner's like, "This is how you do it." And he did another row. Meanwhile, the slaves are laughing behind him, like, oh. And then they give it to another slave. "No, you do it." And the slave's like, he ended up doing the entire garden. And then he complained about how dumb his slaves were, when actually it's how smart they were. Because look who did the gardening. Look who just did that whole thing. Pretty smart. Okay, very good. Another topic. So we have autonomy, resistance,
Slave culture.
culture. Very good. The music, the language, spirituals. Anyone know what those are? Spirituals? Slave songs, talking about the experience of being enslaved, right? Culture. Very good. So I got autonomy, I got resistance, I got culture. One or two more? Let's look at
Family life.
family. Very good, right? Family life. If you bore a son, the slave owner had the right to take that son and sell him, right? Well, now biological mother is not attached to biological son, but that son is clearly somewhere else. What happened? Was there sort of an adoption that went on plantations? The idea of family, not necessarily biological family, but the family that these people kind of recreated. Very good. We can leave it at that. Oh, unless you have another one.
I was gonna say, like economy.
Economy. Can you clarify that?
Just how they were integrated into like the American economy and like capitalism, like they were part of just like.
Okay, I like that, right? Capitalism, which is sort of interesting. Slavery as a method of capitalism, which is ironic. Right? Capitalism is free choice. It's you bought that shirt because you wanted to buy that shirt over that shirt. It's freedom. Slavery in service of capitalism. Weird. Very good. All right. You've done plenty, so you can shut off for 2 minutes.
Two lines were together at Dairy Queen yesterday. I was in lines yesterday.
Okay.
So one that we like disagree with. I was like,